No, I didn't strap a tie on to do this video. Actually, I've just returned home from the Kingdom Hall. I went there this morning to hear the special talk. It's entitled, Is It Later Than You Think? And I think that question is particularly appropriate for Jehovah's Witnesses to consider. Now, of course, the talk outline was directed to people that are not really active Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, the talk concluded with a special plea to those who are maybe have strayed off, become inactive, or disfellowshipped or disassociated for whatever reason. I thought it was kind of hypocritical as well. The Watchtower mentioned that maybe some of you have been stumbled. Maybe it was something even an elder had said to you that stumbled you. And of course, no mention is ever made of the fact that the Watchtower organization itself is responsible for stumbling untold numbers of Jehovah's Witnesses and interested persons. And I won't go into the specifics, but if they were serious about reaching out to those who have been stumbled, wouldn't it be appropriate that they make some sort of apology for their teachings having stumbled so many? I've used the example before, the 1975 fiasco, as many of you old-time Jehovah's Witnesses know. Back in the late 60s, the Watchtower started cultivating this expectation that 1975 would be the end, and a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses bought into that. Some of them sold their homes, which is fine if you do it for the right motive. Began pioneering and all that, of course. 75 came and went, and a lot of people were stumbled. So where's the apology for that? Anyway, the Watchtower basically, rehashed all of the things, the signs supposedly that have been fulfilled since 1914. And I've commented on this before too, and I won't dwell on it, but according to Revelation, the 6th chapter, when the seals are opened and the horsemen of the apocalypse go on the ride, the fourth horse has death seated upon it, and Hades is closely following it. And it's given authority over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the long sword, with food shortage and pestilence. A quarter of humanity. Well, what was the percentage of people that were laid low by World War I and the Spanish influenza? As appalling as those numbers are, 35 million dead in World War I. The numbers vary greatly on the Spanish flu, but some say 20 million, some 50 or even more. But at the turn of the 20th century, the population stood at about 1 billion. Of course, it's 7 times that now, isn't it? But back then, let's say World War I, it was 1 billion, even though it had to have been larger than that from 14 years into the century. And even if we include, say, let's call it 100 million killed from the war and pestilence, including World War II, that's still only 10% of the population. And of course, the population has been growing steadily. So no way was that aspect of Revelation fulfilled, or has it been since then? Of course, the mindset of Jehovah's Witnesses is that the sign of Christ's presence can never, ever display itself more convincingly, more dramatically in the future. In other words, there could never be another world war. There could never be a global pestilence. But isn't that sort of stupid? I mean, that is really stupid. Here we are on the edge of World War III. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses make no mention of that. But people who are conscious of trends in the world recognize that Anglo-American, Israeli combo, NATO is driving for World War III, a nuclear world war, with ultimately the targets of Russia and China. So what happens if there is a world war? Well, the Watchtower's 1914 dogma will vanish. as it will, for sure. The brother, of course, given the talk, he read scripture here in Luke, the 21st chapter, and verse 34. Pay attention to yourselves, that your hearts never become weighed down. Well, this is Jesus talking, and he said, because that day will be instantly upon you as a snare. So keep awake, he says, for it will come in upon all of those upon dwelling upon the face of all the earth. Keep awake then all the time, making supplication that you may succeed in escaping all these things that are destined to occur, and in standing before the Son of Man. Well, all these things that are destined to occur, now even the Watchtower admits they have not occurred, even in the past 100 years, since the Great War and supposedly the beginning of the conclusion of the system of things. We're still waiting for all of these things to occur, which would include, of course, the desolation of the holy place and men becoming faint out of fear and expectation of the things coming upon the inhabited earth. But this expression here Jesus made, that you may succeed in escaping all these things and in standing before the Son of Man. What does that expression mean, standing before the Son of Man? Well, it means standing before the judgment throne. And if you remain standing, then that means that you receive a favorable judgment. Well, the Watchtower claims that the judgment of the house of God, which is the beginning of the judgment, as Peter wrote in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, judgment begins with the house of God. It starts first with us, those who are anointed Christians. And the same pattern was established in the prophets when Jehovah brought Nebuchadnezzar as his executioner. He said, start in my sanctuary. So that's the pattern for us. Well, the Watchtower says, yeah, this was taking place back in 1918. That's when Christ came and he judged all those claiming to be Christians, and he rejected Christendom, and he appointed the Watchtower and over all of his belongings, and gave that organization his unqualified approval and blessing. Well, they apply the prophecy here in Malachi, the 3rd chapter. I'll turn there quickly if I can. Well, I won't read the whole thing, but Jesus is referred to as the messenger of the covenant, of the new covenant, of course, and he must clear up a way before Jehovah. And it mentions in verse 1, suddenly there will come to his temple the true Lord. So the spiritual temples, Christ's congregation, suddenly Christ comes to judge those. It says, but who will be putting up with the day of his coming? The coming of Christ. And who will be the one standing when he appears? On the one hand, the verse I read in the 21st chapter of Luke, it was on the outline, is it later than you think? They applied that to the future. Keep awake that you may succeed in standing before the Son of Man. The very same expression used here in Malachi, the Watchtower says that took place back in 1918. And the Bible students associated with Watchtower were the only ones standing. And of course, they've long since died off, and a whole new generation has come and applied that prophecy to themselves, that they have God's unqualified approval. They're the ones that passed the test. The faithful slave passed the test. That was that Watchtower article a number of years ago. So obviously something is wrong here. And the question is it later than the Watchtower Society thinks it is? And we would have to say that it is, because in their mind, and they've cultivated this mindset among Jehovah's Witnesses, that the coming of Christ is going to be to judge the world, which it will be, of course. But the judgment of the house of God is first. And if the Watchtower is what it claims to be, then the judgment starts with them. One of the signs that, one aspect of the sign of Christ is that many will be stumbled. And of course, Watchtower applies that elsewhere. But what happens if there is a world war and food shortages and pestilence on a scale that far exceeds anything we've seen? The Watchtower will have nothing to say, will it? It will be discredited. And as a result, many will inevitably be stumbled. And they will not stand before the Son of Man. So, that is a good question, isn't it? Is it later than you think?